أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ثم بعثناهم لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا نحن نقص عليك نبأهم بالحق إنهم فتية آمنوا بربهم وزدناهم هدى.
So what are you up to, Suved, nowadays? What are you doing?
Full-time work.
Full-time work?
Full-time work.
Struggling.
What I describe as like the other side? The other side of like the uni life?
Yeah. Because, you know, you're on the WhatsApp thread, so like a Hanafi fiqh thread, and you're always talking about, you know, the kuffar this, the kuffar that, and then you join like the 9 to 5 hustle life. That's all the kuffar are doing, but then subhanAllah, like, we all have to like endure it anyway. You know, like, because I'm doing it as well, right? It's like, I feel like a slave, like, we want to be a slave to Allah, but subhanAllah, we're a slave to something else, you know what I mean? In this dunya. So, what's your experiences like so far, you reckon?
In full-time work?
Yeah.
It's so diverse, man. But time is the main thing. Like, as in, I've been trying to think how I can advise sort of people in the musalla or people in uni who have free time, or how I can like present the reality of full-time work. It's very bleak. But I think the best way I've been able to do that is by saying that while you're at uni, you have control in your life. Like you control your time. So you can, if you want to like stay up late and study, you can do that and sleep in the next day. If you want to, pump in 6 hours, and then, go to lunch, you can do that. If you want to work till late and then you sort of go home late and, sleep in and then you have control of your life. If you want to go to some event and stay out late or whatever, you can do all of that. So you have like a degree of control, a degree of like autonomy. When you start working, all that goes away. Like something else controls your life, something else controls your time. So you have to be at work the next day. So I have to leave. So I have to leave uni at 9 p.m, right? So I can get home and sleep by 11. So I need about 6-7 hours sleep a day so I can go to work the next day and sort of function, right? And I have to have that sleep because if I'm at work, I can't just take a qaylula whenever I want, because you need your work to do, right? So you lose that control. And effectively, the only control in your life you have left is after work, about 2-3 hours. So all I have left in my life is after work from about 6 to 9. These 3 hours, that's all the time I have left that I own, that I'm free to do whatever I want in. And everything else is controlled by effectively work, even outside of working hours. Like your sleep times, when you can eat, when you can go to lunch, even praying and stuff, it's a struggle. We went from like musalla, we go to the musalla, rock up 15 minutes earlier, pray dhuhr, have enough time for sunnah, enough time to like waste 4 hours on the infamous Sumsa couch. All that goes away. Like you just go, you pray. If you're lucky, you can pray sunnah and you get straight back to work. So.
Wouldn't you say that's a good thing though? Because that makes your priorities straight. Like, I guess you have that flexibility if you didn't work to do whatever you want. Chill back, relax, sit around after, prayer or whatever. But then, because work's there, it makes you kind of fixated on a routine that need to get stuff done.
Yeah, but, I mean, the former is only a problem if you're ineffective with your time. Right? So, if you're good with your time, then you can channel that good in khair. Like, it doesn't have to be hanging out or, or having fun or going to movies or whatever. If you're good with your time, this is what I tell people now when I meet them at uni. I tell them maximize every single second. Because, if you don't have a strong, depending on what your goals are, I sort of inform people about how to acquire, or how they can attempt to acquire some degree of Islamic knowledge and, come to have like a reasonable familiarity with the tradition. And you need to acquire quite a bit of that before you start working full time. Because from then, it's a lot harder, much harder to acquire the Arabic, to acquire, the science, even resources. Because obviously mashaykh are busy, they're not always available. So acquiring the resources, the material, the sort of connections with the ulama, overseas, study online, etc. So it doesn't have to be spent in vanity. It can be, if you use it productively, it's quite a loss.
I was just gonna ask about that and about how you came to become so focused on studying the tradition? And was that something, because you would have, been in high school and stuff, I was wondering if it was something you came in then or something you entered into at uni, which was certainly the case with me. I knew very little. Like, I became Muslim quite a while before I started uni. And then it was only when I started uni that I became to be interested in the Islamic tradition, actually, like, seeking knowledge and the intellectually rigorous side of Deen. And I was wondering how I've never actually asked you in all the times I've spoken to you how you actually came into that.
Well, uni. I think in high school, Islam is like this one big, like, grey blurb, right? It's just like this vague sort of thing where it's just about pretty much what your parents brought you up upon, right? Which isn't too deep. So Islam was just, pray, fast. And I knew the basic, the kaba'ir, like don't commit zina, don't drink and kill and all that basic stuff, right? And like I used to just listen to a bit of Hamza Yusuf, a bit of Shaykh Anwar al-Laqi and etc. The Judgment, what's it called? The series.
Hereafter series.
Hereafter series, that's the one. And he's still after you. So those are obviously very good. So I heard tidbits here and there, but nothing like proper. What is a hadith? What are the critical conditions? Who are the major ulama? What's a Bukhari? Like when someone says it's hadith in Bukhari, what does that mean? So obviously that wasn't there until I came into uni. And alhamdulillah, I had good people around me, good mentors, good teachers, and it was really biographies was probably the thing which I was like, wow, this is the tradition that I belong to. Like that this there's like one superhuman giant after another in terms of intellectual ability, and they're just everywhere. Yeah.
To go further, because I want to give more of a formal introduction for people, because alhamdulillah, we have boys in the care, we have a lot of viewers from America. Actually, our most viewership is from America, so we also want to bring the Sydney community into the I guess the global scene. Suved is going to make you a global superstar here at Boys in the Cave, inshallah. But but essentially, we have people, in the community. It doesn't have to be like shuyukh, like high up there, but even just people in the community amongst the boys, whether it be in the MSA or, the uni scene, where they're very, into the Deen in terms of studying. And I guess we don't have enough of that actually in this, from what I've experienced, but I guess for me, Suved, so the guest, we have on today is someone that I feel that has achieved that, and probably Raphael. Actually, we have two different special guests, so to explain.
Yeah, Josh's voice has changed a lot.
Yeah. So people recognize Raphael. He was on our podcast as a guest a few episodes ago. He's actually come on as a guest kind of co-host today. But our main guest today, Suved Siddiqui. Is that Siddiqui?
I don't even know, man.
Suved Siddiqui. Just go by that. So, alhamdulillah, he's studying commerce at University of Sydney at the moment. How old are you, by the way?
26.
26. Okay, so, you're like one of the boys. At the same time, you're actually teaching, you're teaching Hadith, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're actually well learned into the Deen in regards to, Islam and all that. And you're actually one of the boys. And I think that's something that we need more of in this community. And that's why I treasure you as a person, because you're always on the Hanafi fiqh threads and, informing the brothers, alhamdulillah. And then it's someone that I can fall back to and message as well. Because shuyukh aren't always accessible.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The knowledgeable brothers around the MSAs are kind of like the intermediaries between the shuyukh and the lay people. Because, like a bloke who prays all his fard prayers, who studies engineering, who's from like a migrant background, he's probably not going to go to the masjid, wait for the shaykh, ask the shaykh his question about concerning his life and get like a detailed fiqh answer. He's probably going to be in the masalla, and so he needs people around the masalla who can answer those questions for him, because as you mentioned, shuyukh aren't always accessible. And so that's why I think the importance of those brothers, the knowledgeable brothers in the community who have the ijazahs to teach and who have the Islamic knowledge and who have studied the tradition in depth, they actually have probably almost as much influence in what happens with the religion as the shuyukh themselves do. It's very, very important. And
you, because obviously, Rafa, you're a revert, convert, whatever it is, but you mentioned that, Suved had an impact on your life as well. So can you share with the audience? You want to give tidbits?
This is getting very romancy, but like I see the guy once a week. No, I'm joking. He's subhanAllah, when I first came to uni, as I mentioned, I had like very little contact with the intellectual side of the religion, and I never thought I could empower myself to know the answers to these things, or even where to begin to like look for the answers in the correct place, or what happened. Like, because when you're coming into religion and when you're coming into Deen, even growing up, you see like punch-ons about Masay that you don't really understand what's happening. Like moonsliding, for example, is one that happened recently. Like you see punch-ons about these things and you don't understand, but then you start to learn more about the religion. You start to understand why difference of opinion happens. And so all of these things, like, I don't know if I would have learned them if it weren't for Suved and other brothers as well.
The Masala environment.
The Masala environment, yeah.
SubhanAllah. So, yeah, welcome to Boys in the Cave, Suved.
Thanks.
So, I think before the show, Raphael mentioned that even your journey through the Deen, you were inspired by biographies of the scholars, big Islamic scholars. You want to share light on your journey as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a fascinating journey. It's just a pretty boring one, actually. I would just you'd read books and you'd say, like Al-Razi said, or Ibn Hajar said this, or Ibn Hazm said this, or Zakaria Ansari said this. I'm like, who said what? Right? I wouldn't get it. So I thought one thing I should do is, before delving into the Islamic sciences, is just get a good background in the biographies, the biographical sort of literature of Islam. So in the summer holidays, I just go to the library and I'd spend like an hour or two every day just biographing one major scholar. Like, I made a little list, right, of frequently occurring names, and it just became more and more impressive, and I was just more and more blown away by the caliber of these sort of individuals across everything, in terms of their bravery in resisting the tyrants of the time, in partaking in particular Islamic campaigns, in speaking the truth when required, in their discipline. That was a big I was surprised at their discipline. Their hard-working nature. Their memories were something particularly fascinating to me. Like almost reaching sort of like superhuman statistics, in terms of writing books, in terms of like sleeping and eating, and piety was a huge thing as well, the humility. So these things are just I was more and more blown away by how fascinating these people were, and like that naturally would intrigue you as to what they left behind. And if you hear about a great individual, a great man, a great scholar, you want to know what he had to say, what he sort of, his positions, his perspectives, his insights, his religious advice, and that was kind of the path forged into actual Islamic sciences.
Yeah, even me personally, I think you scour through Merciful Servant YouTube. And then I think there was even one, I was talking to Raf about it before the show. It was about, like, me personally, I think Imam Ghazali has really made an impact in my life and just his journey. Like, obviously we know the texts and all the books he wrote, but just his journey alone is a subhanAllah. I think it's something that people should really, read and have an idea of. And he left everything to just be a normal person, to purify their heart, subhanAllah. So I think everyone has those kind of stories where they can relate to, hold dearly in regards to Islam, because it is the Deen, you know what I mean? It's something, it's about the afterlife as well, and something to inspire you in this modern day and age.
Yeah, it's something Hamza Yusuf said as well, was about how the proof of Islam doesn't necessarily exist in books, rather in the people that embody the knowledge that...
Yeah, Hujjatul Islam, Ghazali, Shawli Allah is also Hujjatul Islam. In fact, you'll find in the Kalam of the Ulama a lot where they'll say things like, if there was any defect in Islam, this particular aalim wouldn't be Muslim. Like Anwar Shah Kashmiri, one of the greatest. In fact, a lot of the scholars, they call him Imam al-Asr, the Imam of his era. He died, he's in the 19th century scholar, from Deoband, India. And many of the, like Shaykh al-Fatah Abu Ghudda and many of the ulama, they said he was the scholar of his time. And he was, he brought together the brilliant memory along with piecing intelligence. So he had, like, what we call eidetic memory, right? Which is a photographic memory, effectively, right? Just a more technical term. But he was also very intelligent. So, a lot of the ways they praised him was that if there was, Ashraf Ali Thanwi, for example, he said that if there was any defect in Islam, it wouldn't have escaped Kashmiri's insight and intelligence. And the way they substantiate Islam, the way they refute the shubuhat which are casted against Islam, There's a scholar now, for example, Allama Khalid Mahmood in Pakistan. Amazing aalim. He speaks English as well, which is rare for that caliber scholar to speak English. Again, phenomenal memory, In fact, one of the things I learned about him was, in his entire 9-year studies period, he was never seen to take notes. He never took notes. And they're like, why? Why don't you take notes? What's the point of being here if you don't take notes? He goes, anything into my ears, I never forget it. But his intelligence, his teachers said that if a fitna was to emerge during Asr time, he would refute it by Maghrib.
That's funny.
Right? So these sorts of like, Allah preserves the Deen through these extremely capable individuals.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Like you mentioned, actually, I want to touch on this subject. You mentioned the whole idea of aalim, right? And I guess the word gets thrown around in this kind of day and age. And that's what we have to be wary of as Muslims growing up in this day and age, because we actually did banter about the 9 to 5 hustle, which we can probably elaborate later. But you also have people learning the Deen in this kind of day and age context, right? And it might be different to an aalim in, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, right? So do you feel like in general that the term aalim is used more easily now, where it's not, earned for people who aren't actually alims compared to the people you call alim, 100 years ago, 200 years ago?
Naturally, there'll be a decline in the level of knowledge. I mean, that's actually from Hadith Bukhari of Anas, that as time goes on, the ilm becomes actually more and more scarce. So that we see, we don't have people like Yahya bin Ma'in or Imam Ahmad who memorized 1,000,000 hadith, right? Or Abu Zur'a memorized 700,000 hadith. We don't have people like that anymore. So definitely knowledge has decreased. And also, with that decrease of knowledge, the expectations of what knowledge looks like has also decreased, right? So, these are very difficult terms to, with any degree of precision, define anyway. Like, what is an aalim? Like, Allah doesn't say anywhere in the Quran an aalim is someone who studied 6 years in Azhar and memorized Alfiya ibn Malik and, Iraqis Alfiya. Like, there's no such criteria. Nor is it in the Sunnah, nor is it in the Kalam of the Sahaba. There's general things like aalim is the one who acts upon his knowledge. Aalim is the one who studied, obviously, right? It's what aalim, right? He knows. So, but you won't find specific definitions of these things in the Quran and Sunnah itself. It's not informed to us by wahi. So these are istilahat, these are terminology which the ulama coined to describe people of particular stations in knowledge, like mujtahid. Right? Ijtihad just means to work hard. But in usul al-fiqh, ijtihad is someone who can infer ahkam directly from the nusus, from the Quran and Sunnah. But these are terms, and it's layers, it's tabaqat. These are things which the usuliyin came up with. So obviously there will be a lot of subjectivity around them. Right? Who's an alim, who's not? Someone will say, oh, this guy's a mujtahid mutlaq, which is the highest level. And some others will say, no, he's just a layman. Right? And there are very good examples of that in our times and other times as well. So alim these days, it's hard to really define. I think these days people use the word shaykh more, right? Shaykh. Which itself is difficult to find, because in Arabic it has 3 possible meanings: a learned man, an old man, or a very wealthy man. But in Islamic sense, the only classical definition I've come across is Badruddin al-Aini, who was one of the contemporaries of Ibn Hajar, and they have a very interesting rivalry. In fact, their rivalry was actually the subject of a whole PhD thesis. It's about 400 pages, just recounting stories of their rivalry and all the different interesting sort of ways that manifested. But anyway, this scholar, a huge 7th century massive imam of hadith in the Hanafi madhab in Egypt, he said a shaykh is basically anyone who has the capacity to take on students. Right, so that was his definition, which is a decent one because it both demonstrates wavering levels of knowledge between ages, but it also gives you some sort of basis of qualification. Obviously, tacit in his statement, someone who can teach is the prerequisite qualifications and study, etc. But that's one opinion, right? These days, I think if you say shaykh, it's someone who studied 6 years overseas, right? Usually 2 years Arabic and then 4 years of Sharia. And that's pretty much shaykh. In the subcontinent, if you say alim or maulana, that's someone who's done the Dars al-Nizam 6-year program. Then the mufti is someone who's done the takhassus, the ifta 1 to 2 year program. And shaykh al-hadith is someone who's given the authority to teach Bukhari. So there's a lot of subjectivity around these terms, like what they mean. There's no real precision.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, firstly, was really interesting. You said ijtihad means to work hard.
Yeah.
So I guess we're all mujtahids in the modern world, working hard for the capitalist system.
Yeah.
No, but in light of that, I think something that's really interesting was Islamic knowledge and the path to becoming an aalim, like, was it ever, you mentioned how these days, you have strict Sharia programs, you do was it a 6-year
Generally speaking,
yeah.
6 years, yeah.
That would never have been the case in the past, right?
No.
This is like a modern phenomenon of scholars being trained. And I was just going to think about, in the modern world, studying and, studying to become a scholar of the Islamic tradition, it takes obviously immense dedication. And I think we could all agree on that. How is it possible to do that in a modern context where, you also have to make a living and you also have to, provide for yourself, your family, etc., and work particularly in the West, the 9 to 5, the grind, basically.
I'm not going to lie, it's pretty hard, right? It's pretty hard. Just before we get to that, a couple of interesting things you've touched on there, though. One is this idea, there's a trend in the Ummah at the moment, right? Particularly in the Arab sort of Saudi sort of area, which is that you have to have what they call a shahada, which is a graduation, equivalent of a graduation university certificate, right? And if you don't have a shahada, no one, you're not really taking that seriously. And in fact, I saw there was a scholar here recently from, I think, Riyadh, and he was looking at, potentially starting up some sort of madrasa program here, or jamia program here, and he said only those who can apply, who have a shahada, a certificate. So it doesn't matter if you spent, for example, if you went to Mauritania, and you studied with Sheikh Hassan Adidu or Bin Baya, Sheikh Bin Baya, if you studied with him for 20 years, they have ijazah system. They give you ijazat in the mutun. They don't have he's a shahadatul alimiyya, he's a graduation certificate, right? That wouldn't be recognized because you don't have this technical piece of paper, right? And you're probably aware, Sheikh Mukhtar al-Shanqiti and Sheikh Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti said this is shahadatul zur. This is a false testimony because it suggests you have knowledge, but the ulama know you have nothing when you graduate with one of these, right? In fact, Sheikh Muhsin al-Abbad, one of the great Madani, they call him Muhaddith al-Madina, he said that 6-year program, the only thing you walk away out of that is your fard ayn knowledge. Right? Not Sheikh or Distar or Mufti or Mufassir or Muhaddith, la. You just that's probably a bit extreme. Or maybe it's relative to his own stature and knowledge because he's so learned. But, so this whole university sort of imposition on knowledge, it's had quite dire consequences, right? And that's not me, obviously. I don't even have the ability to comment on this, but I'm relaying the kalam of 2 scholars mainly. Sheikh Muhammad Awama, a great Syrian alim, and specialist of hadith, and Sheikh Dr. Salah Abul Hajj in Jordan. Now, Sheikh Muhammad Awama was one of, anyone who's interested in hadith knows this name. You can't not be interested in hadith, not know Sheikh Muhammad Awama. He's one of the greatest muhaqqiqin of hadith alive. He's got a 5-volume Tahqiq of Tadrib al-Rawi, which is a very large book in hadith and everything, right? The full package. So he gave a talk, and in that talk he mentioned something interesting. And he says that, he says in his words that I sought knowledge in the age where knowledge used to be sought at the feet of the ulama, right? Lap to lap. Or lap 5, what's the knee to knee, lap to lap?
I don't know, I'm aware of this.
Yeah, but you sit really close.
I don't know of anyone who sits lap to lap these days.
Lap to lap.
Think about that.
I don't know the expression, right? But I'm basically, you're sitting, very close to them. So, the Sheikh's got his book on his lap, and, you're directly opposite to him, 3 centimeters apart from you guys, from the two. He's got his book on his lap, right? So he goes, I sought ilm in that period, and then he goes, I sought ilm in the university period as well. So he goes, he's in a unique position to comment on the efficacy in both methods. And he says that this university style seeking knowledge is nothing. Right? And Dr. Salah Abul Hajj has the same position. He goes that this movement was led by Azhar, and they're we're taking the modern step, etc. But it's had catastrophic consequences. Yeah, well, just an ijazah would basically be a specific for people who may not understand. Ijazah is the license to grant permission, right? So ijazah, there's different types of it. Ijazah amma, ijazah khasa, ijazah of tadris. There's various different types. But generally speaking, ijazah gives you permission to do something. So if I take an ijazah in something from my shaykh, that gives me an ability to do something. Well, now that could be just to narrate the hadith without explaining it. That's ijazah of riwayah. You can just narrate the hadith And basically it's just to correct your copy and to make sure you've got a properly authentic copy back to the imam, or it can be to teach, or it can be to train others to teach. So different ijazat will allow you different things, but it basically gives you some sort of permission to do something with the text.
So in this day and age, you've got that system of churning out, degrees or whatever, but it's like kind of not true. It's only farther line, as you mentioned, essentially. I'd
probably say that particular comment's a bit too far.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it all depends on what you do there, right? Like, I've heard of stories of people, my friend came back from Medina recently, and he came back early, but he was in second year, and he had third and fourth year students coming to him to teach them beginning texts, because they were just wasting their time. You have people that just play PlayStation all day.
I've got my PS4 here right now. As he says that,
a class.
that would,
shaykh.
I'm like hanging my head right now because that would absolutely be me.
Well, you should go Mauritania where there's no such thing as a TV.
Yeah.
Subhanallah, I'll die, bro.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, you have very, very capable individuals as well. Like locally, to give you an example, Shaykh Abu Bakr Zawd, very strong, right, in tafsir. He clearly utilized his time very, very well. And he's passionate about it. And sometimes I've asked him questions, and he's just flowing with knowledge of tafsir, right? So you have good graduates and bad graduates. It's what you put in at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah, but the actual system and how facilitative that is towards preparing a student of knowledge to take on knowledge and become a carrier and teacher of knowledge. I think this university style has had quite negative effects.
Because I heard personally that the idea of learning in Islam is that you sit with a scholar and then they'll take your hand, not literally, but they'll make sure you've grasped the concept and everything, you've learnt it, and then they'll be like, okay, you're good to teach others. Whereas obviously in the university setting or whatever, that's not going to be the case. You just graduate, pass, fail. It's very subjective, how much knowledge, all this kind of stuff, and even an exam kind of period. So I guess, would you say that the best way of Islamic knowledge being preserved is through how, traditional Islamic scholars did in the past? And after you've answered that question, then how, because we live in that society where it can't be done in a wider scale. So how do we go about it?
So just to answer the first one, the classical way of seeking knowledge was that phrase that I jumbled. What was that? What did I say? Knee to knee?
Knee to
lap to lap.
Yeah. Lap to lap,
it's not from not mouth to mouth, but...
But it's a what's it called? It's a proverb to show how closely attached to a scholar you should be. So classically, you had what's called suhba. Suhba with the long prolonged companionship with someone who's a true master. So, for example, Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, one of the most prominent personalities in Islamic sciences and tahqiq, what we call, which is publishing books, verifying manuscripts and publishing them, right? So he spent 60 years studying with Shaykh Zarqa, 60 years with him, right? And 60 years is being groomed and advised and observed, and he's praying in the masjid with him, going on trips with him, and the whole time he's benefiting from this giant, right? And then Shaykh Fattah Abu Ghudda, he himself groomed and trained personally Shaykh Muhammad Awama, who I mentioned earlier. Right? So you have this legacy, and then obviously Shaykh Zarqa has a chain, who has a chain, who have a chain, and it goes all the way to Rasulullah, right? So this idea classically of suhba was you'd spend, time with your teacher, and you'd let him rub off on you. His good characteristics, his taqwa, his ilm as well. But there was this spiritual element involved as well, not just this academic, which is something I've actually realized in later years, that it's not just, because I spent my beginning years in the Islamic side, like usul al-fiqh and hadith, in Quran, the technical stuff, right? But the effects of knowledge lie in the suhba, in the adab, in the akhlaq, in fiqh a little bit as well. So in the classical way of doing it, it was just the sheikh, he transmits the sum Islamic experience that he's lived, right? A whole life of learning and devotion to Allah. He transmits that to you. And you take that and then you take it from all these other people and you become this vessel of taqwa and of ilm, etc. And you pass it down to your students. But now this university thing is 14-week semesters, you come for a lecture, come for a tute, literally in the Islamic world. One of my teachers and friends in America, he's runs a sort of institute, and he's trying to make like the one who actually organized Sheikh Ammar, right? Sheikh, his name is Sheikh Ahmed Khatir. So he's trying to organize, like, he's done a lot of khair in trying to make ilm accessible to the West, especially for the Hanbali madhab. Right? He's done a lot. So he was telling me he's struggling to come up to make ilm accessible through a university format, because imagine Maliki fiqh in 14 weeks.
It's impossible.
How's that possible, right? In the Hanbali madhab, if you do one of their books called Zad al-Mustaqni', with Mukhtar al-Shanqiti, it takes 8 years to cover that book.
8 years?
8 years to cover one book. The book is published in one volume.
And 8 years, is that like
6 days a week. 6 days a week, I think 6-7 hours a day. It takes 8 years, right, to cover that book. It's like, how do you condense that into 14 weeks, like 3 hours a week?
Lecture, shoot, go home.
Yeah.
Don't rock up to your lecture.
Yeah, and like you get your mate to sign you off on your tute, so you get attendance, and just you cram the night before. Like imagine, like that's actually a good analogy, right? So imagine a scholar who spent 8 years in one book, 6 hours a day, for 6 days a week, for 8 years straight, under a master, a true master. Someone who's memorized. Like I asked some of your students, what Sheikh Muhtar Shanqiti like, right? Literally, he comes into the class, he does this, he starts reading. Like that. He like puts his hand over his eyes, starts reading, starts quoting from books, poetry, etc. Right? And so you have that, and then like who would you take in from? After seeing that, would you be comfortable with having that taught in like a 14-week thing for like 6 years? Half the time you were just bludging, Obviously, so you can see the sort of the difference.
And remember, I think it was a hadith you quoted right at the beginning. It was like the knowledge is decreasing over time. Do you think this is one of the ways through the university setting that we're seeing knowledge decreasing essentially?
Yeah, it's definitely had a big hit, right? So one of the scholars I mentioned who've actually noted this calamity and drawn attention to it is Dr. Salah Abul Hajj in his book Al-Madkhal. And he dedicates a large chunk of that book to commenting on how, dangerous this particular trajectory is. Right? Now, it's good. What's good is that because the Islamic tradition is so strong, and people are so tied to the tradition and so fascinated by the idea of of celebrating scholarship, that no one is content by the university study. So I knew a shaykh. He went to the Medina University study, but 85% of the time he was in the haram, taking ilm one-on-one from the ulama. Even Sheikh Yasir Qadi, for example, on YouTube. He's explained some of his experiences, and he says that he's took ilm from the Medina, but he spent a lot of time under ulama. He studied all of Bukhari with Safi Rahman, Mubarak Furi, the whole thing, one-on-one. He studied personally with Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Abbad and all these ulama. So a lot of people will actually do both. They'll combine their institutional studies with private scholarship, but a lot of people won't. And the thing is, you won't actually be able to tell. So... But definitely it's had perilous or dangerous implication in terms of the way knowledge is transmitted. And the ulama are slowly bringing this to light.
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that, like when you try to fit it into a university course or like even we see a lot of like crash courses nowadays are like 2 hours a night per week. There's a lot of masjids around them. Mostly for lay people, but like, if you study fiqh, like sometimes you spend 2-3 hours on a particular mas'ala, really, really, really dense. But I just want to
for
like a
issue of fiqh,
an issue pertaining to something
like moon sighting, for example.
Yeah, that's the most common one. So, like, how do we sight the moon? So you might spend 2 or 3 hours discussing why certain scholars came to certain conclusions, with what evidences and how they justified that. So, trying to shift this back towards more like, how would we, in this day and age, encourage people to get into the tradition, understanding the society that we live in now, which is very capitalistic. Just like a little bit capitalistic, it just so happens, like 9 to 5. You can't really devote yourself full time. How do you go about acquainting yourself with the Islamic tradition? What are the steps? What do you have to know? Where do you go?
Like I said, it's not easy, right? It's obviously not easy to do that. But one thing that really does work in our favor is the modern enhancements of technology. So you can be connected to some of the, like literally some of the greatest ulama alive. So, for example, me and some of my friends, we study online. Obviously, online it's got its cons as well. Like, you don't get to actually study with the shaykh in person. So that Sahaba thing I was talking about, that can't actually rub off on you because you can't see his taqwa. But it's the next best thing, right? If you can't travel to him, then you have to benefit from somehow, right? But anyway, so we studied with, his name is Sheikh Hassan Haidar. He's the muhaddith of Yemen at the moment, and he's been studying 18 hours minimum every single day for the past 40 years straight. 18 hours a day.
Wait, so there's 6 hours left of the day, so what does he get up to? Does he ever have a family?
PlayStation.
What does he do?
Just praying, Yemeni life, right? So,
Well,
yeah, it's different sort of life over there. Like, literally, like, he has a couple of sips of milk for breakfast. Like, very, very zahid, he doesn't need much to survive, right? So, but he reads 18 hours a day. He's been doing it for 40 years straight. Right? And this has been observed by a number of my teachers. They observed him directly. Because he was staying with them in Malaysia. He went to Malaysia for a couple of dawrat, a couple of circles. And he was staying with one of my teachers. That's how I actually got in contact to start these classes with him. And then that sheikh told me that I saw him study 18 hours a day minimum. Just reading. Right? And he's got an the way he quotes chains is like you and I would quote like our own names. That's how he quotes chains. Like, when you're so intimately familiar with something, you start to slur it. Like, if I said repeat the alphabet, you know, like A, B, C, and you start slurring it because you're bored. Like, it's, you know what, I know it, so, that's how he quotes chains. So technology allows you access to that. So one of the things which work in our favor is technology. So that's really helpful, that you can connect with major ulama overseas in America, English-speaking ones as well. So utilize technology. A lot of ilm on YouTube. Like, as much as YouTube is bagged out, I found it quite ironic, interesting little, like, there was this famous YouTube sheikh, he's bagging out how ilm is taught on YouTube. On YouTube. But it's on YouTube itself. So it's like, do I not take that as well? So, but there's like high caliber scholars on YouTube, especially in Arabic, right? In Arabic, like any major aalim you can think of today, he's got like a number of classes he's taught on YouTube, right? Obviously limitations there, like no questions and all that sort of stuff, but doesn't mean you can't benefit. There are huge, whole fiqh books on YouTube, Shama'il. Type in Nawawi's 40 Hadith. Very reliable scholars have taught that book on YouTube. So you can use that, like if you're traveling to uni, for example, right? And, usually in the mornings, it's you don't get a chance to sit. So you're just standing up, right? And it's usually very packed, so you can't even read, or like if you read off an iPad. So just listen to something, rather than staring at and looking at trees, listen to something. Universities, I think one of the best things you can do is utilize university. Because in university you have time, but it goes unrealized because people don't really realize how much time they have and how precious that time is until they have to fight for it when they start working at uni. Like when they start working full time, sorry. So that's when they realize, but then it's too late now by then. So utilize the time you have at uni a lot. Like that spare time. And you can incorporate, all the whole sort of hanging out and the dawah and this, that, you can incorporate that. But if you be consistent, like you put in, 2 hours a day I'm going to study my Deen, right? Or whatever the case may be, whatever your time scheduling may be. And you will see over 4 or 5 years of an average degree, it adds up. It would add up to be a lot.
I heard for you, I think someone told me like you started learning the like properly intensely like first year uni, second year uni or something. Yeah. It's probably not even first, it's probably second year. SubhanAllah. First year I was like, what's going on? What's a Salafi? What's a Sufi? What's this Khilafah thing that people are talking about?
That's where I think most people are at now.
Yeah.
Like they hear things and they're like, what is a Salafi? What is a madhab? What is fiqh? Like,
what's aqidah? Why is Ash'ara deviant apparently? Why is Salafi deviant? What is the deviant, right? What's a bid'ah? So,
like the sister quoted this hadith on Instagram, like, why is it wrong? Why is someone else telling me that it's wrong? Why is it
weak? How can a hadith be weak?
What do you say to people in these? We have a lot of. There's nothing wrong with being there. We've all been there. I'm probably still there. But where do you go from like there? What do you say? Do you guide them towards seeking? Where do you guide them towards seeking knowledge and what do they do from that point? So YouTube is one of the ways you mentioned.
No, YouTube would. I mean, I wouldn't say to anyone like take your ilm from YouTube exclusively. I think it's a good supplement. You should take your ilm from ulama, like so you can interact with them. Ideally, preferably in person, but that's not always possible. Mashayikh are very, very busy. They usually only do like sort of general sort of classes on like introduction to Hanafi fiqh, or Maliki fiqh, Hanbali fiqh, or whatever.
No one does Maliki fiqh.
Yeah. Well, there would. There's quite a bit of a demand building up for Maliki fiqh.
Alhamdulillah.
Which is where you guys will come in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But so Mashayikh really only have time for like the absolute layman who just wants to know like how not to fall into kufr,
yeah,
or like how to or and then they have time for like the really elite students who are like fluent in Arabic and they've studied for years now, etc. So there's like nothing for people in between, which is usually where the university students fall in, right? So YouTube is a good supplement to that, but I think where you can fill that void is online mashayikh, because you do like Azhar pumps out like probably 1,000 mashayikh a year. Right, or Deoband pumps out a lot of 1,000 mashayikh a year. One of the strongest institutions of learning in Deoband is South Africa. Right, South Africa's done really well. It's the only one. It's the only place I'm aware of where in like recent history where institutions of scholarship started off there, and then it became so prominent that people travel to that place to learn, right? Normally, well. From the West, Like normally you go Azhar or Medina or Deoband or Nadwa or Syria or Morocco, something like one of the famous institutions, right? But like 600 years ago, 700 years ago, you wouldn't say, I'm going to Darul Uloom in South Africa. Like, why are you going to South Africa? Go Azhar, go Medina, go Damascus, go Sharafiyya in Syria, right? So South Africa's done really well, and I've a lot of my teachers were from South Africa, and I was asking them, it's a very rigorous program. And I was asking them, like, what's it like? And they said, if you sleep more than 4 hours, you're not going to survive here. It's very intense, right? And they said, like, a fatwa, because in the takhasus fil ifta, which is a specialization in giving fatawa, it's a very rigorous program, 2-year program there. There's a practical element as well, where you have to answer a certain amount of fatawa. And each fatwa will, on average, get knocked back 20 times. Like, you write the fatwa, you spend the whole day researching, you take it back to the shaykh, and the shaykh will be like, nah, wrong, go do it again. Right? And that'll happen like 20 times. So, and the good thing with that is, they all speak English. South Africa is an English-speaking country. They're all fluent in English, right? And they come back and they just sort of don't have many students. So what you'll find is a lot of ulama and mashayikh that are very, very well grounded, and they are willing to take on students. Yeah, like literally, I spent 2 days on Google typing in like different institutions and contacting mashayikh. Like, oh, sheikh, I've read about you a bit here and there. You're free for classes, right? And the response was quite positive. Yeah, response is very positive. That's how I found Sheikh Ahmed Khatir, who then facilitated Sheikh Ammar for you. Yeah. So you have people out there. It's not
Absolutely, like it's just a matter of digging and going to that effort.
Yeah, it's a matter of like you can't. I mean, there's obviously a lot of virtue connected to ilm, right? There's a lot of fadl. In fact, one of the greatest of the Syrian scholars, he taught the whole generation of Syrian scholars of the 20th century. His name was Sheikh Badruddin al-Hassani. Amazing Imam. And he was asked, like, Sheikh, if I told you had 1 hour left in your life, what would you do? He said, if I had 1 hour left, I'd seek knowledge for that 1 hour. And this is something which many of the ulama have done, like Abu Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa, he passed away seeking knowledge. Sheikh Aziz Rahman al-Adami passed away giving a fatwa. Ghazali passed away with Bukhari on his chest. And a lot of the ulama passed away in this state. So that sort of fadl and reward, Allah's not just going to just sort of hand it out to you. You have to struggle. You have to do something, right?
So I think, like, to bring more, like, this is great. We're having this conversation about how deep you have to go out of your way to learn the Deen and the sacrifices you have to do, sleep less and the struggles you have to do overseas, all this kind of stuff, and do a kind of a lifelong journey. But I just want to bring some perspective into it, because we live, in the society where it's kind of, Islam's put into that bubble of, hey, let's do some few classes, in the, Saturday, right? So you mentioned, though, I understand, because you mentioned, like, make most of your time at university. But let's just say university's passed, he's done his groundwork in his ilm, but now has to get married, right? And I'm talking about from the perspective of he's actually kind of stuck in, the West, Australia, UK or whatever. So he has to get married, right? Suddenly all these priorities, is it kind of obligatory for the person who's already studied, you know, who's going out of his way to seek knowledge to continue? Is that you can't just put a halt and a stop, be like, okay, look, my life's getting a bit hectic now. Yo, let's just put this studying Islam and Deen properly to the side a bit because, you know, life's getting hectic? Or should you always have that mindset that you should always be learning Islam regardless of what age you are? You just have to find a way, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, depends on the kind of terminology we're using here. If we say, is it obligatory to do that, then obviously no, right? What's obligatory is the fard ayn. So once you're eligible to, for example, pay zakat, you have to know the fiqh of zakat. You have to know the fiqh of wudu and tahara. So you can pray, so you can meet the prerequisites of prayer. You have to know the fiqh of prayer itself. You have to know like the basics of fasting to get your deen, to be able to practice your deen without contravening it, right? So that's what's obligatory for you to know. And then there's what we call fard kifaya, which is it's obligatory on someone to know. Right, so it's obligatory on someone to know the intricate sciences of hadith, of jarh and ta'deel, of ilal, of takhrij, of mustalah, etc. Someone has to know that. Someone has to know tajweed. Someone has to know like as in tajweed, the branches of it, right? Like the details of it. Someone has to know qira'at. Someone has to know like usul al-fiqh. Someone has to know like all the different sciences of Arabic, right? But does everyone have to know that? Obviously not. So if we're talking like in terms of, is it obligatory, is it fard, or is it haram not to know it? Then obviously it's not, right? But for a talib al-ilm, is it recommended? Then of course it's recommended, right? You should, I mean, like the ulama, like Imam Ahmad used to say, seeking ilm is from the cradle to the grave. It's something which you have to kind of take with you. And obviously there'll be, there's a funny story of Sufyan bin Uyayna, one of the great imams, contemporaries of Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, etc. He had his own madhab as well, but it died out for reasons Allah knows best. But one of his students came up to him. A keen student came up to him and said, "Shaykh, I want to go further on my knowledge, right? I want to start seeking knowledge properly, like full time sort of thing, right?" And then Sufyan bin Uyayna, he said, "Are you married?" And then the talib, he said, "Yeah." He goes, "Khair, the ship has sailed," right? And then he goes, "Oh, Sheikh, but I also have 2 kids." It's like, the ship's drowned. It's not coming back. Right? But obviously he's exaggerating. Like Abu Hanifa was married, and most of the imams were married, right? And they had kids, and their kids became massive ulama as well. So obviously, like, life does, constrict the amount of time you have. Like I was complaining about full-time work earlier, right? So, but you just, ilm adds up, right? One of the Shaykh al-Fatah Habahuddin, he's got a book called Qiymat al-Zaman, the value of time, and the ulama, according to the scholars, or with the scholars. And he mentions stories in there, and he's got a good discussion on how little bits of knowledge add up. Right? So you might think like 1 or 2 hours a week in hadith is not much. But that 2 hours a week, every week, for like 8 years, that's going to add up to be quite a decent amount of knowledge.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so wherever you can squeeze it in.
So you can study the Deen at your own pace.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking like, where do you want to go with this? Like, if you want to become like a mujtahid and like rescue Islam from like all the atheist criticisms and like make fiqh relevant to the modern times and make ijtihad and all the fiqh issues which are which we're grappling with, that's going to require obviously far more intense study. That can't be something like you squeeze in after work for an hour a week. We're talking serious learning here, right? But that, as I mentioned, is fard kifaya. That's like on the ummah, there should be people who are doing these things, right? And they are. Like Mufti Taqi al-Uthmani's got a book called Fiqh al-Buyu', where he's discussed the modern financial contracts and the Islamic, ruling in light of the Sharia, particularly the Hanafi madhab, but also other madhab as well. So that is, that Mufti Taqi is coming from a life to 70 years of learning and research, right? When he was a kid, he would go into the library and he told the librarian when she leaves to lock the door so he can't get out. So he'd be forced to read, right, in the library. So Mufti Taqi has a particular role to play. He's training thousands of muftis, thousands of ulama. He's their reference point, right? He's answering a lot of questions to advance Islam. But his role is not the same as our role. Right? So like, under you, under me, we don't have thousands of trained muftis under our guidance and supervision. So our role is different, right? I think for you and I, it's probably just in the Sumsa, Musalla, right? And for me, the Sumsa Musalla serves as an alternative or as an option for Muslims who want to survive at uni, right? With all the haram and the fitna and the music and the alcohol and the culture, which is pretty much forcing itself on you. How can a Muslim just sort of relax? How can you stay afloat? For me, that function is served by the Musalla. So, for like, I would say, like, our role is to, or the level of learning we need is that which is commensurate to facilitating that environment, right? And if you look at it that way, it's not that much. Like, you don't have to have read thousands and thousands of volumes in fiqh and be a master of all the different Islamic disciplines, right? That's just, people aren't asking those sorts of questions here. People are asking, oh, hey, apparently Abu Hurairah fabricated hadith, right? Which they might hear from their arts class or some person, which doesn't require like tomes of knowledge to be able to answer that, right? Or apparently the Quran has grammatical mistakes or whatever the case may be. You don't have to be an absolute master to answer stuff like that. So our burden, it's our taklif, our responsibility isn't as much. And what our, I think, responsibility is, it's we can actually acquire that. As long as we're disciplined and as long as we put in the work. And I think that the knowledge you can acquire with university commitments, with full-time work commitments, etc.
No, I was just going to ask though, when it comes to studying, about the process of doing so. Like, a lot of people put emphasis on and really think that you have to memorize everything by rote. What is the role of, rote memorization in studying the Islamic sciences? Because a lot of people would find that very daunting. They're like, I have to memorize this and this, and I'll never be able to sleep. I'll just be there trying to memorize one page for 6 hours. Is it how important is memorization to the Islamic sciences? And what would you say the most important thing is to have? Because a particular like Shaykh Amr, who we were talking about, the Malik fiqh teacher, he talks about the most important thing being understanding of the religion. He quotes that, if Allah loves someone, He will give them understanding of the religion. Which is basically, if you break it down more, like understanding the fiqh issues and knowing what they mean in the grand scheme of existence, being able to process all of that. So what would you say is the most important thing? Is it memorization? What is the role of memorization? What is the role of understanding? And what is most crucial when seeking knowledge in relation to these things? Yeah.
I mean, memorization is obviously very important. It's extremely important. But I've never heard of someone say that memorization is more important than the actual learning, right? So that hadith, مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهْهُ فِي الدِّينِ, the one who Allah intends good for, gives them tafaqquh in the deen, right? Which is a form of understanding, a good religious insight, right? So tafaqquh, proper fahm, proper understanding is the emphasis always, right? But that doesn't mean that memorization doesn't have an important place. Very important, right? I mean, you mentioned Ghazali was a big influence in your life. Most people are familiar with the story of which Siddiqui mentions in the Tabaqat, that the highway robbers who took his manuscript, and then he said, give me back my knowledge, and then there's exchange, and then Ghazali said that Allah was speaking through him to me, and then he spent 3 years memorizing his material, and he said from that day on, I never, everything I learned I memorized straight away. So obviously memorization has a huge role to play in Islam. Many of the ulama said, Hassan al-Basri used to say, I only consider as ilm that which you can take into the bathroom with you. Right? Shafi'i said the same thing as well. So ilm has to be, in fact, there's a very interesting exchange between Shaykh, the Mauritanian aalim, Shaykh something Adoud. I think it's Shaykh Muhammad Adoud, I can't remember his name exactly, but he was one of the few people in his life who was seen as senior to Marabat al-Hajj in knowledge. Right? And he had memorized, as Zarkali mentions, that he memorized literally thousands of books. He'd quote the Qamus al-Muhit, which is 8 volumes from memory. And he met Shaykh al-Azhar in a conference. And they were having lunch together. And then Shaykh al-Azhar said, just in as a jesty sort of rivalry type of thing, he's like, so who do you think are more knowledgeable? Your Mauritanian ulama or our Egyptian ulama? And then the Shaykh Adoud, he said, your ulama are more knowledgeable in the day, but my ulama are more knowledgeable at night. Right? Meaning at night time, when you can't actually look through the books because the lights are all off, you can't make recourse to your massive libraries, then your alim are hopeless. Your ulama are hopeless. But my ulama, it doesn't matter if it's night or day, because they've got it up here, right? And Shaykh Abdul Karim Khudair, actually, one of the greatest hadith scholars in Saudi, he's published so many books, amazing works, right? He says, we live in a very unique era, where ulama become laymen overnight. And then like Shaykh How, he's like, oh, when the electricity goes off, all these ulama become laymen. Because when you can no longer quote your books, it's like, oh, I gotta wait till 3 o'clock when the electricity comes back on so I can show you the book, right? So, obviously, ilm is very, very important. Memorization is very, very important. But no one, I think, will ever say it precedes fahm, understanding. Understanding is obviously the most important element. There was actually, just before we move on, there's a story. There was a scholar called Ibn Muflih. His name was Himar al-Furu', right? The donkey of Furu'. Al-Furu' is a book which Ibn Muflih wrote. We basically quote all the aqwal from Imam Ahmad and some of the early Hanbali imams. And there was a faqih in the majlis giving durus. And then there was a guy next to him called Himar al-Furu'. And they called him that because he'd memorized Al-Furu' the book. But he didn't understand anything of it. Didn't understand anything, right? So the sheikh would say, okay, read. And the guy would read the book from his memory, he'd go, stop. And he'd explain it. And his name was a donkey of Furu'. Like, because he's like a donkey carrying Al-Furu'. Because he doesn't understand any part of it. So,
like, we have that situation where people are learning the Deen, you know, really into the Deen, and they've sat with the scholars and stuff. But obviously, I want to talk about the funding behind it. Because let's just say they're living in the West, they have to travel out to Mauritania or whatever, and then live there, and then come back. Obviously, they need money, right? And maybe in some situations, there's families. You know what I mean? Or that take the families. I've heard stories actually where I think there was like a family. He took the whole family to Syria so he can study, but he had to sustain them as well.
Yeah.
So there's some like crazy stuff, right? People are going to great lengths to learn the Deen, but obviously there's a financial issue where they can't make ends meet. Do you feel that it's up to them to find the funds and, you know, be smart about it, work hard in the West or whatever, or even work at that place if they go Syria, for example, and get that money to self-fund their education also for their family? Or is it up to the Muslim community as a whole to be able to donate to these kind of scholars? Or what's the real situation actually if, you know, if it's happening like that, or if you've experienced anything like that maybe?
It depends where they're going. So, for example, Darul Uloom in Karachi, they sponsor students, right? Even Madahir al-Ulum in India, one of my friends, Saad, visited it, right? So they have dorms for students and they provide meals. It's obviously not 5-star. It's quite, it's not the greatest, but it's not supposed to be, right? You're there to seek ilm. So some places sponsor the actual learning. Just complete sponsor, like Medina, for example. Not only they actually pay you, they give you a salary. Medina University. So some places will sponsor, in which case that's obviously very easy, much easier, right? But some places won't. Right? Mauritania, it's like half sponsorship, half like, you got to sort of facilitate yourself. That South African place I was mentioning, Darul Ifta al-Mahmudiyya, that's actually really nice. Like it's cozy, almost, right? But they have a very select intake. They only take like extremely talented, not talented, but they got a stricter criteria. So a lot of it will be sponsored. So you can actually, you don't have to rely on anyone, right? But definitely, from a community perspective, Imam Shafi'i said, don't stay or go past 2 lands. A land without a doctor and a land without a mufti. One for the dunya, one for the akhirah. So it's fard kifaya on every community to have someone who can instruct them in their religion. Someone who can advise them as to how to deliberate inheritance, who can determine a nikah to be valid or divorced or whatever, or advise them of their salah, lead them in salah, etc. It's fard kifaya, right? And if no one is doing it, the community has to sort of put the resources together and sponsor someone. And obviously that guy he wants to get married, he wants to have a kid and all that. So yeah, they should have something like that, right? But ideally, the best thing you can do is obviously be financially independent, right? And the ulama had a lot of emphasis on that, on being financially independent, right? Abu Hanifa had his merchanting business. He was actually quite wealthy. Imam Malik became quite wealthy towards the end of his life. And the ulama, they had they had good day jobs. Like Ibn al-Hafidh ibn Qutb, one of, according to the Hanafis, he's Ibn Hajar's main student and successor, right? And he was a skilled sewer. He used to sew things, and he became renowned for it. Ali al-Qari was a calligrapher. Khalil al-Maliki, he was a fighter. He'd give his durus, he'd come to the Malik, the 5th classes, with his chainmail. And he'd give his durus and go back to fighting. Right? Yeah, so all these ulama, they had craftsmanship. There were some of them blacksmiths, some of them were, they had professions, a lot of them, right? Some of them were scholars, they were paid by the government, they were judges, they were learned instructors of particular universities. But definitely they had a means of living. It was highly recommended for them to have a means of living.
SubhanAllah. Because that actually, a lot of people who, I guess they have a warped perception of Islam where they want to study the Deen, they travel out somewhere, they have like no money or anything. That's bro, tawakkul cuz. Like, yeah. I've got this. Like, it's not, like, do you even have belief in Allah if you, don't give it up all for the sake of knowledge or whatever? But then you just brought those amazing examples where, there were scholars back in the times that had craftsmanships and they were making money on the side. They were doing this like entrepreneurs pretty much in that sense, right? But then it's about bringing that perspective and the being realistic about the situation you're in. Because we have to live. It's like the situation we're living in now. We have to live in the dunya in some sense. We have to make ends meet in that sense. But then at the same time, you've got to be doing something where you can help the ummah. Because obviously the state of what the ummah is in now, we should be doing it more than ever. But then we have to be practical and be like, got to sustain, myself, my family. My family has, certain responsibilities that they need me to fulfill all this kind of stuff, right? But then I feel some people aren't bringing that realistic approach to how to approach the Deen. Yeah.
I'd probably be somewhere in the middle in the sense that an aalim ideally should be self-sufficient in the sense that he doesn't need to rely on people. But at the same time, like we don't live in a world which acknowledges or rewards talab al-ilm. We don't live in that world, right? These days, very few places, and like I think there's probably no example in the West. If you seek knowledge, it always comes at the expense of dunya. If you go 6 years overseas, that's a medicine degree or engineering degree or law degree you couldn't do here, right? If you seek knowledge away from uni or at uni, then you're taking time away from studies, right? If you want a proper, like it's hard to be like a HD average student at a good university and be learning Arabic and then Quranic ijazat and learning the sciences. Like, time is limited. So, from a community as well, like, you got to think at it from the ulama's angle. If to acquire a trade these days requires a lot of time, full-time work, right? So, it's very difficult to sort of, especially in a very fast corporate environment, like, if you're out of your profession for 3-4 years, it's going to be very hard to find a job because your skills have become redundant, right? And like the profession moves on, the industry moves on, and like your knowledge is redundant. So no one's going to hire you. So at the same time, even though ulama should be self-sufficient, the community should also be willing to help out. Because, it's very tough for a sufficient amount of scholars. Like we're already short as it is in terms of mashayikh, right? Like earlier we were saying how difficult it is to access mashayikh. And that's not because they don't want to help. But that's just like they're spread so thin. Like a lot of the teachers I used to study with early on locally, like they have no time for themselves or their family. Like they start after Fajr and they get to sleep at like 1 a.m. because they've just been dealing with like suicides and depressions and people leaving Islam and divorce.
Divorce, I heard, is a big one.
Yeah, divorce is massive.
Like, I think Sheikh Wissam said something like 60 cases in a month. Something ridiculous.
I wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
Like, you think about that, that's like, subhanAllah, bro, like... Yeah. And we can go into why the divorces happen, but the amount that the sheikhs have to deal with is just ridiculous.
I've never met a sheikh or a person of knowledge who wasn't immensely busy.
And you might either.
Who just wasn't completely strong. Like, there was an imam who was affiliated with the Turkish mosque. He studied Arabic in Turkey for about 5-6 years, and I kept asking for Arabic classes. But he literally had no time. Between trying to teach Arabic at a school, doing the janazas for the masjid. All of these things, like he just literally no time, and he was, he'd studied 5 or 6 years in a university in Turkey. He wasn't, Murabat al-Hajj, and the higher up, like the more knowledge you get, obtain, and the higher your position you obtain, the more people start to pursue you, and it's like.
And if someone calls you up, it's like, oh, Sheikh, I'm going to kill myself, so I just want to say goodbye. You can't be like, oh, okay, look, I've got to fit class for 2 hours. So you know what I mean? Like, so these things are like emergencies. And like same as like a sort of a marriage situation where the sister's getting physically abused, or some guys overdosing on drugs, or like they're very busy, right? So I completely understand as to why they can't. I think people bash shaykh, not physically, like. I wouldn't be surprised.
Why did you do my class, bro? Why didn't you do my class?
But I think that they're way too critical of shaykh. Like if you like, I don't think you can criticize a shaykh properly until you live a life like that he lives for a month, right? Where you're just dealing with like trauma after trauma, like day after day, 7 days a week, and you have nothing for yourself. Right? Like one of my early teachers, like he used to drive around in a Daewoo, a broken down, sort of run down Daewoo, right? And he's teaching us how to fiqh, and he's rushing down to the Kimba mosque to teach tafsir, and he's rushing back to some other place to teach fiqh, and he's getting home and he's tired and he doesn't have time for anything. And in between that, he's trying to translate books and he's trying to deal with like debates and all that sort of stuff. So it's very understandable they don't have time.
It goes back to, we mentioned before, like your role in the amount of brothers that are in that kind of MSA clique that we have in Sydney. That, you being that like someone that we've looked to as that knowledgeable person amongst the brothers. And I think we need more of those people around the communities to fill the kind of roles that we think the mashaykh should be filling in regards to the youth and how people are growing up. It's actually kind of down to us to figure it out in that sense, because obviously they have so much to deal with, and it's about bringing, perspective into the whole situation or reality of today's day and age.
Yeah, the higher students of knowledge have a bigger role to play, given the shortage of mashaykh, I think.
I've seen I've seen a lot of revival though. Like I remember when I first came to uni, like there was no such thing as like people wouldn't be talking about we walk into Sydney MSA. Like I've walked in there and they're talking about ijma', like why normal Muslims are excluded from the definition of ijma', right? So like I would never have seen that discussion 8-9 years ago. So a lot of people are getting more and more interested in knowledge. The average person in Sumsa, like they've got some connection to Arabic, they're learning Arabic, they've got some sort of pursuit of eventually being able to teach the madhab, like you, Salman, in Maliki fiqh. Each person has got something on Quran in terms of ijaza, so I think it's picking up.
I think what I think I would stress about that reality though is that before I came to uni, and even in my first year or two of uni, I wasn't interested in those sorts of things so much. Like I always had an interest in Deen, but I was kind of all over the place. You do have to deal with a lot of fitna. You get a lot pushed upon you by the environment, and the way you said it was, I think, the most accurate is that it's really thrust upon you. And it's not something that you have to go out of your way to stumble across the fitna and the issues at uni. And I was never interested in that, but it was the MSA environment and the senior students of knowledge in that propagating and inspiring people like us to become passionate about the religion.
Yeah, and I guess if you're in that kind of bubble of brothers learning the Deen, you want to pursue it in some way, shape or another, regardless, it could be in a small steps, but inshallah, like I guess as a community, it's about progressing, because as you mentioned, you walk into a library and people are talking about what's ijma and all that. That's something that wouldn't have happened before. And I feel like the other big thing it actually links back to what you said earlier is about technology. And I feel like because it's all these discussions are accessible through YouTube. Funny story though. So, I think, the Rihla program? I think it's in America. So I think Hamza Yusuf and Abdul Hakim Morad run it and stuff.
In Turkey? They go to Turkey?
I think sometimes it's in different places around the world. Yeah. So I think this year, like a friend is going there, and I think it's in America this year, but usually they go Turkey, Malaysia and stuff. And because it's obviously Hamza Yusuf, a lot of people want to obviously go, right? So because Hamza Yusuf is very popular on YouTube, you have people going there and it's just like, can we take a selfie with Hamza Yusuf? But it's like a legit class. It's not like don't fool around. Like you're not allowed
Yeah.
technology or something in the class, but then
Yeah.
because of all these little, I think you could say maybe YouTube celebrity fame
Yeah.
or whatever it is. It has, although maybe there is bad things from it, but there's good things come out of it. It makes people think, oh. Now, even me personally, I'm listening to a bit of, Purification of the Heart by Hamza Yusuf.
That's
Man,
incredible,
subhanAllah. Yeah, it's incredible. So, all these accessible things, it's like just on the podcast app on your phone. You listen to it, people get intrigued. People want to go
Yeah.
out now. So,
there's no excuse in terms of, like, no one can say, well, we're living in such... there is some excuse, obviously, but the resources are there without a doubt. A lot of the aalim courses online that I know, a lot of the institutions I know, they're struggling to have students. So it's not like there aren't people accessible. Like Mufti Tawsir, who came to Sydney Uni, I think 2016, right? He's struggling to keep his online classes alive because there's not enough interest, right? Mufti Yasir, who came last year in December, brilliant scholar, right? PhD in Hadith, studied with some of the greatest scholars of our era. He's got more than 100 works to his name across translations and articles, etc. He's struggling to have enough students year by year. So the resources are there, the opportunities are there, just the interest isn't there. So, if people want to fill the void, it's not. I think it's just it's just not enough interest for it. And also, I think there's a connotation that in order to gain knowledge, you have to go overseas.
Yeah.
Right, but you can acquire like a good amount of knowledge where you're fairly familiar with your religion and your Islam, and like you have a good connection to Islamic scholarship and to Islamic tradition without having to go overseas. Right? Like in terms of fiqh, knowing the ahkam, in terms of knowing the classical scholarship, the Islamic history, the Islamic sciences, you can acquire a lot of that without having to go overseas.
I want to raise a bit of a point, kind of tie it back to, our 9-to-5 work hustle life kind of thing. So we obviously talked about people who may study the Deen at their own pace versus someone who's actually into the Deen a lot. So they're sleeping like 4 hours a day or whatever, 3 hours a day, reading books 16 hours a day. So we have those kind of levels of people in regards to people who are learning the Deen, right? And then there's the ordinary Joe Blow, which is probably me. You know what I mean? Basic salah, just go to work, come back, do a podcast, you know what I mean? So you have those levels of people, right? But then I want to talk about like more rewards, hasanat, right? So I feel like personally, I have a story to share. Like I feel like even your ordinary kind of Joe Blow, not saying me, but someone else perhaps, can make an impact, even though might not be in the sense of knowledge, because we feel that our perception is, the more you study, the more you learn, the more you teach others, and that means you're way above the rest of the ummah, which may be trash. Like obviously, knowledge is more valuable in that sense, but I'm talking about more impact and getting rewards. So can a person, like a lay person like me, do, just normal dawah at the workplace in kind of not full openly, but in the sense of, just talking to co-workers, just having passion about the Deen in their own. I'm trying to make myself feel better about myself.
I was just thinking about openly giving dawah, what that would have meant. So it's just like you stand up there with the black flag and be like, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and then just like that's openly giving dawah. And be like, I'm a Muslim.
And you go back to work. So when's my pay? Next Tuesday. But so like, is there opportunities for kind of lay people to make an impact in the workplace, or just going about life and having the Deen up their sleeve, compared to someone, actually into the Deen and studying and having a lot of knowledge and, them teaching other people?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Jannah isn't only for the ulama. Jannah it's for everyone. It's for anyone who spent their life in service to Allah, which doesn't have to be scholarship. And not all the Sahaba were ulama. In fact, the Sha'bi and Ibn Hazm and others said there were only about 6 to 8 muftis amongst the Sahaba. Only that much. Those are good fatwa. So what about the other? Abu Zur al-Razi said there was about 115,000 Sahaba. Yet less than 10, according to majority of scholars, were actual muftiin, people that can give fatwa. So what happened to those Sahaba? Did they not serve Islam? Of course they did, right? They served Islam better than any one of us could. Better than any aalim in this day and age could, generally speaking. So laymen have a huge role to play as well. If everyone is aalim, then
Who's the worker?
They just go to the hospital and then it's like, where's the doctor? It's like, we have a mufti, but...
Yeah. In fact, Imam Ghazali has a very interesting observation about reality. He says that the natural way Allah has designed this world is that very few people, in general, as like a necessary truth to reality, will be actually interested in or like completely occupied in religion. The reason for that is because this world is a test. In order for this world to be a test, it has to be attractive and alluring, right? In order for it to be attractive and alluring, there has to be development. If we lived in like a post-apocalyptic sort of state where everything's like run down and there's no cars, there's no like internet, it's just like shanty towns everywhere and death and blood, and is anyone going to care about like the dunya? No, but chances are people like this life is lame anyway. Let's just worship Allah and get it over and done with, right? So in order for this dunya to be a test, there has to be development, has to be like nice food, nice cars, nice clothes, career, wealth, technology, TVs, nice houses, all that sort of stuff. And in order for that to be there, most people have to be busy with that, busy with advancing the causes of dunya, which make the dunya more alluring, more attractive place. Which means most people won't actually be completely obsessed and focused and active in the deen. That's like your standard model for how this world works. So, but we also know like Jannah will have a lot of people, right? There's one hadith which mentions that out of 100 rows, 60 rows of Jannah will be consumed by our ummah. 60 whole rows will be consumed by our ummah. Ummah of Rasulullah alayhi sallam, right? So, and add to that, obviously the normal qualifications sound like Allah is Arhamar Rahim, He's the most merciful, He loves to forgive servants, etc., etc. The times we live in now are particularly tough, and I mean I can't think of a period in Islam where it's harder to hold on to Islam than ours, because we live in a time where there's no khilafah, so we live in like the precise opposite of that. In the center of that, right, which is like the heart of like where kufr sort of prevails. It's everywhere in terms of fitna, in terms of ideas against Islam, in terms of like a very public agenda against Islam, in terms of media, everything, right, work-wise. I mean, you probably know how difficult it is to even pray, right? So that doesn't come without reward. Like that difficulty in holding on to a deen is met with an equivalent reward, right? And I ask a lot of people, like, I ask them a question whenever they sort of complain about how difficult it is to sort of stay on Islam. They're like, oh, I don't think there's much hope for me. Like I do all these sins and I can barely, pray more than my five daily prayers and fast Ramadan. I don't think there's much hope. And I always tell them, like, I ask them the question that in their mind, actually I'll ask you, right? I think I've already mentioned this to you, so I'll ask you that if I told you, is it possible for the likes of you and I in this room, is it possible as a mere idea, is it possible for us to have more reward than the Sahaba? What would you say?
Nah, you're dreaming, buddy.
Probably right. I'm not saying we're more virtuous than the Sahaba. I'm saying raw ajr, reward, right? Most people say, no way. Sahaba, right? Allah's pleasure with them is in the Quran itself, right? And it's very direct praises from Rasulullah. But in numerous authentic hadith, in Majma' al-Zawaid, al-Haythami said it's authentic, Ibn Taymiyyah said authentic, Ibn Hajar said authentic, many of the ulama said it's authentic. There's a hadith which mentions that there will come a time where there will be people who will have 50 times, and some narrations say 40, or in some narrations say 10 times the reward of the Sahaba. Imagine that. 50 times the reward of the Sahaba. 40 times the reward of the Sahaba. Like, not just more, 50, 60 times, 50, 40 times more. And then, obviously, Sahaba perplexed, like, what? Where are the Sahaba? Who are they? We built this deen from scratch, right? How are these guys coming out of nowhere and taking on the reward? So, you can imagine they're surprised. So Rasulullah said that, true, you are my Sahaba, but they will believe in me without having seen me, and you found a helper to the truth, whereas they'll find no such helper, right? So it's very easy to believe in Islam. Obviously, the iman of the Sahaba is more than anything we can ever comprehend, right? But imagine how much easier in this in this this tidal wave of kufr that we live in terms of attacks on Islam, attacks on the Aqidah, this constant tashkik, this constant casting of doubts against your iman every single day, right? On anyone who's given da'wah for like 15 seconds would know all the difficulty that this whole scientific sort of imposition of, if it's not scientific proof, it's not proof, and why anyone who believes in religion is irrational, emotional sort of being, who's just sort of looking for something to soften the pain in life, all these sort of dumb narratives they create, right? Imagine how easy it would be to maintain your Islam if you could see water gushing from the fingers of Rasulullah alayhi salam. If you could see Rasulullah alayhi salam himself, right? Ibn Hazm said, if you want a miracle, look no further than the seerah. The events which transpired and the conclusions which the seerah led to were a miracle in and of itself. And the personality of Rasulullah alayhi salam is itself a miracle. And imagine you could see the moon splitting, rocks talking, trees making tasbih, a jug of milk sufficing an entire army, a small a plate of lamb sufficing a whole congregation. If you could see these miracles unfolding in front of your eyes, how much easier would that be? Right? If you had just Rasulullah himself with you. Like, when we spend time with Mashaykh, how high our iman goes. Imagine if you're with Rasulullah the whole time. So to maintain your iman without him, alayhi in a pool, in a whirlpool of kufr, that should be met with more reward. That's the rational reason why the ulama explain as to why we get this reward. So for us, our prayer is not like the prayer of the Salaf. It's not as easy as praying the Salaf, right? Like Alqama, he had a family, right? It's one of the great students of Ibn Mas'ud. And he had a son, Alqama had a son called Abdul Rahman. And Abdul Rahman was like a typical sort of subcontinent family, like one guy's a doctor, one guy's an engineer, one guy's like some chartered accountant, one guy's some lawyer, and then there's like the aalim. And he's like the black sheep of the family. He's like, he's a disappointing. I try to sort of hide him away in the closet and just like rocking back and forth reading Quran, like that. So like that, in that sort of environment, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You were talking about how, you have that one black sheep in the family, and there's a son of Ibn Mas'ud, and you were talking
So Abdul Rahman, he was that black sheep, right, of the family. And he used to pray 700 rak'ah nawafil every single day. And he was like the disappointment. He was like, he's kind of my son, but he's kind of not. And he used to pray 700 rak'ah. This is authentic in Dhahabi Siyar Alam al-Nubala. And he was like the worst pushed by the family, right? So I've never heard of anyone in my life that prays 700 rak'ah nawafil, right? So our nawafil is not like their nawafil back in the day, right? And Nawawi said in his Majmu' that the standard practice of the normal person, the Salaf, was to finish the Quran once every month. Right? Once every 7 days or once every month. There's two narrations. The standard practice is to finish at least one juz per day. According to the most conservative estimate. So holding on to the Quran, reading Quran in our day and age, we have no time. Most of us don't know Arabic. It takes a very long time to learn it. We don't grow up in a time where everything is built around the Quran. Right? So it's the reward for doing that is a lot more to receive, right? There's another hadith thing, but there's a bit of difference of opinion on the chain, but most scholars say it's permissible to quote, which is that man tamassaka bi sunnah, whoever holds fast to a sunnah, عند فساد الأمة, when the ummah is in a period of fasad, then he has the ajr of 100 shaheed, 100 martyrs. He's got the reward for holding on to sunnah when the ummah is in a period of fasad. So this is stuff we have access to, right? For me anyway, I don't know you guys, but I can't pray 700 rak'ah and work full time and do everything else, right? It's just not going to happen for me. Nor can I do what my Shaykh Hassan Haidar does in the desert in Yemen, study 18 hours a day, right? Although I have his memory, so I couldn't even if I wanted to. But that doesn't mean we're disqualified. So Allah tests and rewards according to the circumstance He put people in. But if He put you in the Salaf, your expectation would be to finish the Quran every day and pray 700 rak'ah and eat very little and etc. Right? But He's not going to put that standard on you now. In Sydney University, the heart of anti-religious and in particular anti-Islamic sort of discourse, and surrounded by everyone knows this famous story that Bayhaqi narrates in Manaqib that Shafi'i's memory was affected because he saw the heels, right? the more the heels of someone, right? So imagine if they walked around you said today. Like, what would happen, right? In summer.
Yeah.
Like,
Negative memory. Also, I don't know how it would work.
Yeah, no, that's the famous story. If you feel it is, you should tell it actually. It was that Imam Shafi had lost part of his memory. He wasn't able to memorize pages.
His daily section, yeah.
Yeah, and his shaykh asked him, "Have you done? So, like, what have you done?
Yeah.
Because Allah has taken away the gift of your memory." And Imam Shafi was first quite perplexed, wasn't he? And then he realized that he'd seen the heels.
Yeah, so he was trying to memorize his daily portion that he was supposed to memorize, and then he was kind of like he was studying with a window, and then this girl walked past, and the wind kind of blew the jilbab such that part of the heel was shown. Part of the heel. Like, who looks at a heel in these days, right? So, but for that time, exposure to the heel affected his memory. And he went to Waqi' ibn Jarrah, one of the imams of the Salaf, in Hadith, and he said, he said, Shakawtu ila Waqi'. I complained to Waqi', and he said that innama ilm al-nur, that this knowledge is in the light of Allah. Allah doesn't give it to the asi, to the one who commits sins. So, like, you take Waqi' and you take Imam Malik and you take a Shafi'i and you put him in Sydney Uni, 21st century, 2018, in summer, you know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen? So I'm not justifying, like, you have to lower the gaze, or the ahkam apply 100%, right? 100%. But Allah does know your circumstances better than we do, right? And He rewards accordingly. So if we struggle, like, to pray the sunnah at work, like, literally my time for adhkar, the sunnah and adhkar after salah, that's from the place, because I have to pray in the storeroom at work, because we don't have a salah, right?
I've got a story as well, dude.
Yeah, so I have to open the storeroom, pray, close it, come back out. And then I have time, basically, while I get return the keys and walk up the stairs back to my desk. That's the time I have to try to squeeze everything in there, right? And it's just not tranquil. Like, you're praying, you're like, okay, gotta go back to work, but like, shut up, concentrate, right? You're just struggling. And then you're trying to just, like, you don't have that sakina, like, you sit there and just make it slowly and nicely, let the meaning sink in, let the beauty of the dua sink in. It's just like, it's like a thing you just have to say, which you memorize as you're rushing back to work, right? So, but that doesn't go unnoticed by Allah. So definitely, I mean, it's a very long way of saying that we all have a good claim to reward, inshallah.
Yeah, like, even, oh man, I got so many stories to say about just praying at work, and being a Muslim at work is like jihad or something. I don't know, subhanAllah. Like, I think when I first started work, I realized, like, my kind of workplace wasn't that many Muslims. There wasn't even actually any Muslims. I think it was just me. And then there's those one or two Muslims that are low-key Muslim, but you can't even tell from the exterior. So you're just, like, on your own kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then what I was kind of, because, you know, you'd think that if there's a few Muslims, you'd go up to them and be like, yeah, what do you pray? You know what I mean? So I didn't have that luxury. So I'm, like, figuring it out on my own. First day, I'm like, I go outside, I'm trying to find, okay, I'm trying to suss out spots around my area so I can pray, like, for lunch break, right? So I'm like, I found this, like, cheeky, like, underground car park. So I'm like, I find there, alright, sweet. But then, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I should be, like, just asking a manager. Cause then I actually heard a Safina Society episode, and they actually talked about, you know, it's shaitan playing in your mind. That, you know, they'll say something, the manager will say something if you go up to them and be like, ask for a prayer room to pray in, right?
Oh, they're pretty helpful, I found.
Yeah, exactly, right? So then I'm like, yeah, I just gotta man up and not be a wimp. So I asked the manager, right? Actually, I'm in good terms with my manager anyway. But then he's just like, okay, yeah, this, that. They'll book a meeting room for me, but then the thing was that it would be like for 10 minutes, which is fine. But then I feel like I'm annoying him, like, every week, because he's not gonna book that time for, like, the rest of the year. You know what I mean? So it'll be like a week every week. So I try to just go to the receptionist instead. But then sometimes the meeting room's booked anyway. So I'm like, what do I do? This, that. And then I guess there was this one time, right? So my meeting room is literally, there's 3 meeting rooms, but one of them is, like, almost situated in the center, like, smack bang in the middle of the whole office, right? So then she's like, that's the only place you can pray. So I'm like, alright. So it's like, the whole office, everyone in the office is just watching me as I'm praying, literally, subhanallah, right? But then I reflected, I'm like, it's like literally open dawah, like in the workplace, right? But then when I had that situation, I actually have another Muslim guy, and he could tell he's like not as much into Deen, but he's one of those like struggling sort of Muslims, but then he has, kind of iman in his heart. And then he actually started seeing like, oh yeah, like 2 weeks out before Ramadan, it's like, he starts actually coming with me praying, and I actually became a lot, he's like one of my good mates at the moment, because purely through prayer, subhanAllah. And then not only that, and then now he's like full time, look, I'm praying 5 times a day now. I'm doing this, that, like this was 2 weeks before Ramadan, during Ramadan, even after Ramadan, he's like, man, I feel a lot better in my life, and this, that, subhanAllah. So, I don't know, it's just a situation that I had to enjoy in the workplace, but then there's so many things that I actually learned in that situation where, it's just, and now it's got to the point, before I used to be very shady about it, like, why are you taking it, like, cause I keep my prayer mat in my bag, so everyone sees me at lunches, take my prayer bag. When I used to pray in the underground car park, like, just rush off, and like, where are you going? Like, just just going for a walk.
Yeah.
I'm not technically lying, right? Under the Sharia, but
have a picnic, grab some food out and just chill out.
But then, so you don't want to just openly say in that sense, but then now, like, everyone knows, like everyone in the workplace knows, right? And then it's like, even during Ramadan, obviously they know you're not eating, kind of thing. But then, I feel like these moments for the layman are opportunities to, I don't know, convert someone to Islam and make their progeny a scholar, and then you get all the rewards.
Yeah.
That's my master plan. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like in that sense, every Muslim in this day and age, obviously it's tough. I've even heard situations where I had a friend's mum and the HR wouldn't let her kind of pray. Have a meeting room. Yeah, so even people are going that just, to pray. And it's, I guess there are shades of Muslim that people are not practicing and people are practicing and stuff. But even for practicing Muslims, just to be openly Muslim in this day and age is so hard. But then the lengths that we go through to just do a simple thing like bow our head on the floor to worship the Lord.
As a general rule, just fire exits, man. That's where I've been praying. Like, I full made a musalla out of a fire exit. Like, I got cardboard, like a huge cardboard. I made it like a little wudu area with 2 water bottles. Oh. Yeah, and I dry my feet, then I pray on a cardboard. So fire exit's general rule. Right? Until you figure something out.
I used to be really quiet about it, not tell anyone, but then, because the meeting room's how it's positioned for me, one of them I said was smack bang in the middle of the office, but another one is like close to the toilet, so obviously the toilet's separated, but then I'm praying. So everyone, because a lot of people go to toilet, especially when it's like before the end of the day. Yeah. Everyone's just going to toilet, chill there for a bit. You know what I mean? So everyone's just watching me pray. Like, everyone just goes inside. Everyone's just watching me just put my head down. I'm with my, another friend. We're just praying together. I'm just like, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like even laymen have such an opportunity to do dawah just by, you don't have to be open. Like, I've never ever just gone up to a workmate. Actually, I have another interesting story I'll tell you, but I've never just gone up to someone like, yo, Islam's a haqq and you're on batil.
I don't know anyone who's done that. Just like you're going to... Actually, I've never actually had any of these problems because I work with Woolworths and like my manager was Muslim. Oh, nice. Everyone else was practicing Muslim. Yeah. Because everyone's Bengali. They all work at they work at Woolies and Coles, and then they all just like every break, you'd all go. They'd have a jama'ah as well. So
but that's more of an exceptional.
Yeah, it is.
Like, it was like that thing when I was working at Auburn. Yeah. Because I got Bukhari house next to me, I got a Somali Muslim next to me, so that was easy. I could pray my sunnah and jama'ah, the whole thing, right? But you work in the city, like Wynyard or something.
It's hard, yeah.
Very difficult. But it's coming back to the point of the salah, that salah is not like the previous salah. Like, the idea that you have elements in society who don't pray, this is a very, very, very new, this has never happened in history. Like, in history, we've never seen, like, a normalization of the idea that you don't have to pray. That's never been the case. Like, you read some of the stories of the Salaf, like Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, with the way the times that address people, even thieves, etc., they would all come to the masjid to pray. Yeah, so the idea, like, thieves, drunkards, highway robbers, they'd all pray. Right? Because society was organized around praying. Like everything would shut down. The adhan's going off everywhere, musallas everywhere, masajid everywhere. everything's shut down. Like, you're looked down upon if you don't pray. So the society, like, it'd be built around the idea that people pray. So the idea that you had like non-praying Muslims, this is a very new phenomenon. Very, very new phenomenon. So in that time, in this particular circumstance, those who do pray, and aside from those who do pray, those who like are in an environment which is very corporate, very cutthroat, very like irreligious, praying in that situation is a lot more rewarding. So, I mean, you don't have to be an aalim, spent 20 years in Mauritania, memorized the Bukhari, Muslim, the Quran, 10 qira'at and all that, to have a good chance with Allah. That's never been the case.
Yeah, I feel that it's the rewards of just openly being Muslim. Like I was mentioning before, it's not like you go up to someone and just say, Islam's the haqq and all that. Like, dawah can just be being openly Muslim. Being proud of your beard, growing up in your beard. Or just, praying as well. Or even just openly saying you're fasting and during Ramadan. All these little things actually plant seeds, what I've realized, in the hearts and minds of people, or non-Muslims especially. Even for me, right, subhanAllah, I had this funny situation. So I'm in very, very good terms with my managers, right? And they're really cool and stuff, the two guys. And one of them, right, he's the type like you can talk to and stuff like, he's very chill, he's a fun person, right? But you can tell, I can't explain, he's not religious, but he's not anti-religious kind of thing. He's just not religious, but he's like, he calls himself Christian, yeah? So I had like a one-on-one kind of meeting with him, and then, cause he's like, he was just talking like, how's Ramadan going on, this, that kind of stuff. So I'm just like, yeah, it's like, you get through it, and, cause their perspective is that Ramadan's so tough and it's draining and it's killing, but then I actually said the opposite, like, I'm full of energy, more concentration and this, that, and he's like, oh wow, and then he's like, randomly, just out of the blue, just like, but, isn't your religion just based on faith? Right? Like, just, I'm like, but, and then I'm just like, I responded by saying, it depends what you call faith, and then I gave an example that, even the fact that you say your mum is your actual real biological mother is based on faith as well.
Yeah.
If you think about it, right? So I gave that example, and he's just like, oh yeah, touche. I'm like, that was so random. So, like, that's from my personal experience, right? All these little moments and instances, like, you can take it away. I'm trying to justify that, laymen can make an impact in those little ways. They don't have to go out of their way and be like, yo, I'm going to do dawah in the office today, put my hands up in the air, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, just be openly Muslim, and you can, inshallah, maybe, gain the rewards sincerely for the sake of Allah kind of thing.
Yeah, but there's a lot to do outside, like, scholarship-wise. Like, a lot of the problems that Muslims are facing, ilm won't necessarily solve it. Like, if someone's like, they have mental health, for example. Huge issue, right? OCD, all these depressions, pretty big anxiety, all these problems. You don't have to be an alim to solve that. In fact, ulama really couldn't help you here, right? Like, I've had friends that suffered from religious OCD and various other forms of very tough, like pure OCD they call it, right? Which is when thoughts become they're intrusive. Yeah, and the mashayikh, they're actually, like, they're not the mashayikh, but some mashayikh, they're unhelpful in this regard, because they say depression, for example, is caused of your lack of connection to Allah and your lack of iman and this, that. And that's not true at all. These are medical sort of problems, and psychologists and people that are, remotely trained in this area can help. They can help Muslims out like that. And anyone who helps Muslims out is sadaqah. So there's huge stuff, there's, huge areas where you can help without having, being trained.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true when it comes to mental health, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's not a disease to which Allah hasn't made the cure. And just like your body gets sick, obviously your mind is part of your body, it can get sick as well. And I think that it's improving a lot, the attitude towards mental health. The community is really
slowly getting on top of it.
Acquaint itself with. But to wrap it up,
laymen come in there. Laymen will come in there. People with psychology degrees, people with good real world experience.
And the ulama tend to be, one of the great things about the ulama is that, by and large, if they are presented with these sorts of things, there's not a pushback. They are very open, and
definitely,
lots of scholars have talked about how, doctors have come up to them and they do liaise with these people. They do liaise with social workers, and they are often, like, the elite ulama are very acquainted with the sociological realities of the zeitgeist, of the time.
Yeah.
But to wrap it up, what do we aim to achieve after we've gotten to a certain point in regards to seeking knowledge? Is it to give back to the community? And what is the real end goal in the dunya sense, in seeking knowledge? What are we supposed to do with this?
Well, like Imam Ahmed said, he said, you seek knowledge to remove ignorance from yourself and then from others. Right? So you seek knowledge first and foremostly to know how to worship Allah as He likes to be worshipped. That's why Imam Ghazali, he put in the beginning of his Ihya Deen, which, for those who don't know, is the book that he wrote to revive the correct Islamic thinking and approach on how to best get to Allah. And he starts that book with Kitab al-Ilm, the book of knowledge, because that is your rizq, which he says. That's your provision for the journey to Allah. So you do ilm first and foremostly for yourself, so that you can worship Allah according to how He likes to be worshipped best. What He likes in prayer. What does He like us to do when we meet our friends? What does He like us to do when we interact with our family? What sort of adab should we inculcate? How should we pray? What should we do each place of the prayer? How should we read the Quran? What should we think about the Quran? These are all these things which Allah loves. You have to find out, right? And then you do it to transmit that same compliance with Allah's love to others. So if you become, for example, trained in the Maliki madhab, you have understood how Allah likes to be worshipped, and then you transmit that to others. So you are the cause of Allah loving to be worshipped, or cognition of how Allah likes to be worshipped by others, right? So, and that's just from like a fiqh point of view. Then to generally speak, the broader point Imam is getting at is serving the community, right? Serving the community in terms of endearing Allah to them, endearing Islam to them, helping their problems. Even though like a lot of these mental health problems, they are induced by sort of mental health, right? Mental lack of health. So, but Islamic ideas can actually help. Like if you reassure people that that this is a sort of test, all these sorts of theological notions of tawakkul, etc., it helps. It does help. It may not be the solution, but it helps.
Because I was going to completely wrap it up, but that was a bit emotional way to wrap up the episode. But
on that note, we leave you. just cut the audio down.
But
Smash the mic.
but yeah, it's been, for me personally, it's been a wonderful episode because it touched on a lot of bases in just regards to seeking knowledge in the 21st century. So Jazakallah khair, Suved, for coming on board today. Obviously, you've been, a very influential kind of figure amongst the brothers here in the Sydney Muslim community. So may Allah reward you and, make you, strengthen you in your future endeavors, inshallah.
I mean, good. It's actually surprisingly very good to be here. I was like, not because it's not a good initiative, but I was like, well, what'd you get me? Right? But it was good.
And I'm actually keen for more episodes in the future, inshallah, because I think, it was, subhanAllah, like it's underrated. Like, it goes back to, who's working in the community and with the boys and stuff, and we think that sheikhs can only talk about this. Obviously, there's skill set of particular people that can discuss certain topics about the ilm and knowledge and all that kind of stuff. But, it's been really wonderful because it's about staying grassroots in that sense. So, for all our listeners, thank you so much for giving us your attention. If you ever have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at boysinthecave@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. And you can also follow our journey through Instagram. Please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, as that greatly helps us. If you want to say anything or, even meet us, we had a few people message us to meet us in person in Sydney. So if you actually want to do that, or you can contact us through, email, Facebook, even Instagram. So we're open to having dialogue and discussion, inshallah. So from our special guest, Suved, our special co-host guest, Raphael, and myself, we wish you all the best. This is Tanzim, signing you off. Assalamu alaikum.
وربطنا على قلوبهم إذ قاموا فقالوا ربنا رب السماوات والأرض لن ندعو من دونه إلها لقد قلنا إذا شططا هؤلاء قوم اتخذوا من دونه آلهة لولا يأتون عليهم بسلطان بين فمن أظلم ممن افترى على الله كذبا